But what we're doing, we have a 5-year funded study from NIEHS, so a branch of the NIH and EPA, and 3 different projects to look at the link between diet and asthma. And our model is sort of this, which is that we think, we know allergens provoke asthma, we know pollutants provoke asthma, and we're looking at the extent to which diet itself may rev up inflammation, so an adverse diet can rev it up, and lacking antioxidant capacity also affects it. So that's the models, that diet is a modifying factor. We have a combination of observational studies. We're going to observe people in the world, also clinical trials, which I'll tell you about, and then some animal models as well. So how does this look? So this is an ongoing study. We're about a third of the way into this recruitment-wise. We're 200 children with asthma who are school-age children. We're doing air monitoring in their home repeatedly over time in 3 different seasons, settled dust for allergens. We're getting lung function, symptoms, indicators of inflammation, oxidative stress from blood, urine, nasal lavage, keeping track of what they do time activity-wise, and then a quantitative food frequency where we actually are going to be able to measure and grade the diet based on all the macro and micronutrients through a series of using food models and trained field workers to collect what the diet is. This is Barbados. I just show you this example. We're using the same backpack. It doesn't look like it projects very well, but just to show you how portable these are. We're using pollution monitors that kids can carry around with them, and they seem to have fun doing it. At least the first time we meet them. Not so much the second time. So one of the things we're also studying within the diet is this compound called sulforaphane. And sulforaphane is a naturally occurring activator of a transcription factor called NRF2. And what NRF2 does is, it's a normal part of your body system, and when it gets turned on, the whole antioxidant system in your body takes over. And so it's theoretically a good thing if you rev that up. This is a natural compound that's found in cruciferous vegetables, so broccoli and cauliflower. And so we're going to be doing some trials, these are ongoing right now, where people are going to get either alfalfa sprouts or broccoli sprouts and see if we can change what their response is to an inhaled allergen. So see if we can tamp down the allergic response. Because of time, I won't go into this much more detail. One other thing just to mention, though, there's a diet called the DASH diet, which you may have heard of. It's really good. It's been proven to reduce high blood pressure, and within several days, it can bring blood pressure down. There's a variant of it, which is a Mediterranean-style one. It's loaded with unsaturated fats, and we're using that also in a trial to see if we can take asthmatics and change what their response is to pollutants and allergens in a controlled clinical trial. And because I see I'm out of time, I'm going to skip this real quick and just show you what we can do with some of our mouse models, is that the NRF2, that transcription factor I told you about, one of my colleagues has mice that are deficient in that. When they're deficient in it, they have a much more brisk asthmatic response. So their airways constrict more, they make more inflammatory cells and so forth. We can feed these mice that compound, sulforaphane, that comes from broccoli sprouts, and see if we can change how they respond to allergens and pollutants. Separately, we don't have a Mediterranean diet for mice, but we can change that fatty acid ratio. So things like the corn oil and the perilla seed oil, we can change the ratio and see also if we can change what their response is. And what we're exposing them to is allergens, but also pollutants that we collect from the homes in East Baltimore. This is a collector, a friend of mine, Martin Nadu, has a company called Not Mechanical, just helped us build this thing. It's a big drum-sized vacuum cleaner thing that we put in a basement, and it sucks air into a cyclone, and we collect particles that we can use in both human and animal models. And I'll just finish with this. This is it's always easy to sort of pretend I did all this, and I'd like to get all the credit, but it's actually a big crew, and it's an ever-changing crew. There's a lot of folks working on this stuff, and so I'll just leave it at that. I'm out of time. Yeah. Thanks very much.
I just wanted to start by saying that even though my name's on the screen here, it wouldn't have happened without a crew, just like Greg said. And that crew includes, I just want to mention their names, Pat McLean and Madeline Shea. They've both been mentors of mine for the past 2.5 years. I wouldn't be where I am today without their help. But even more importantly are the people who are on the ground, and that's the community health workers. So we have a stellar team of workers that have been with me for the last 2.5 years. And I just want to say, without them, we wouldn't be where we are today. So we heard a lot about this morning, about asthma and the disparities around asthma. So in Baltimore City in 2007, there was a CDC Youth Risk Behavior Survey done. And what they found was that 28% of high school students in Baltimore City had received an asthma diagnosis in their lifetime. Okay? This is a self-report, it's a telephone survey, but it gives you a sense of how common asthma is in Baltimore. So I'm going to go into housing, people, the environment. So housing, we know, has an impact on our lives. And what does the housing look like in Baltimore? Most of the housing where our families reside are in row homes that are 50 years old or older. Okay? There's a high lead-based paint legacy. We've had lead-based paint in Baltimore for many years. Hopkins has produced many studies which have shown that allergens, mouse allergen, is found in 100% of their homes. In one study, they found that out of those 100%, 84 had levels that were equal to like a rodent laboratory. So it gives you a sense of kind of what we're exposed to. And then we have 6 times the national average of mice. So you should come to Baltimore if you don't live there already. All right, what do the people look like? We've got a huge disparity among people. You can see life expectancy changes within 20 years, within just a couple miles of each other in the city. We have a high fire deaths in the nation, and we have more than half the state's EBLs, which are elevated blood lead levels. So what did the Baltimore City Health Department do about that? What we did was we applied for a grant, and it was a CDC translational research grant that we received, and it's called RAD, Reducing Asthma Disparities. And we are working with Seattle-King County out in Washington State, and they have a home visiting program that has been very successful. And so we're like, okay, let's try it in Baltimore. What can we do here in the city? Can we make a difference? So when I first started, I actually flew out to Seattle, and I'm like, wow, what a great city, and you can't imagine to have the same problems that we do. They do. They do have very similar problems. They have more mold than we do. We definitely have more mice and roaches, many more. And so what was our focus? Reduction of environmental asthma triggers and then asthma medical case management. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then our target population was 200 children with moderate to severe asthma. And what we wanted to do was go through the Baltimore City Public Schools. We were thinking that going through the school system, we'd find children who were without a medical home. And what we found was that when we got IRB approval, it was in April, very end of April, so school ends in a month. So we reached out to all of our other clinicians, clinics, Head Starts, things like that, to actually get the numbers that we needed. And so we still recruit from schools, but it is a much bigger pool. All right, what are the goals of RAD? We're trying to decrease asthma morbidity, asthma symptom days, and use of urgent care services. And we want to increase provider knowledge of the environment. And we want to actually have that conversation with medical providers. What is the intervention? It's just like Seattle's at the time. They've modified theirs, and as a result of this, we'll modify ours. It's a 6-home visiting intervention over 6 months with a 1-year follow-up. And we do medication and technique review, identification of asthma triggers, trigger reduction, and coordination with providers. And here is a good place for me to mention about how we motivate families. So the community health workers, they go out into the field and they work with families, and they're given supplies. And those supplies include, on the first visit, like, a notebook with, low literacy information in it that the community health worker goes, through it. And it also includes like mattress and pillow covers and green cleaning kits with, baking soda, vinegar, and Bonami. It also includes something called IPM, which is Integrative Pest Management, which is roach bait and gel and traps. Okay, they're very excited about this. The other thing that they get is a vacuum cleaner near the end and a gift card. So it's kind of trying to keep people engaged, but at the same time, trying to change health behaviors. All right, so what do our clients look like when they first come in the door? So first come in the door, 61% of these kids had had an ER visit in the year prior to entering the study. 85% of the kids did not have an asthma action plan. 35% of the caregivers tested positive for depression. And you see the home environmental triggers. Now those look low. And the reason why they look low is because I'm only looking at severe. So what we had to do is that with mice, we rated it. We did a rating scale. We did mild, moderate, severe. So when you look at all of the environmental triggers for mice, it's much higher. It's closer to like 54%. It's the same for roaches and smoker. It just jumps up significantly. So you're wondering, like, what does it mean to have a severe mouse infestation and that 28% of your families have that? It means that you have mice in two or more rooms of the house, and that means that you have evidence of them and that the family sees them on a regular basis. Roaches, it's the same. So you see them in more than one room, you see them frequently, and the community health worker finds evidence. Smoking, they're actually smoking while the child is at home. So that's considered severe. And then 18% have pets, and what that means is a pet is actually on the child's bed. So, and we actually don't tell families get rid of your pet. We actually take a different approach of, let's get the pet out of the bedroom, let's wash the linens more frequently. If the child is going to play with the animal, let's wash their hands, taking those steps first. So working with community health workers, and I'm so glad we did. I'm a nurse by training, but I feel like they're the ones that are, at least for our program, really know how to communicate with our population. And so this is where the social determinants of health come in. And it's those individual behaviors. And so I remember when we started training, trying to convince the community health workers that you couldn't use Raid, sprays, bombs, or antifreeze with cotton balls to kill mice. I was like, we can't do that. And I had never even heard of the antifreeze idea before, but that's pretty common in the community. So I was like, look, you guys, we got to do the IPM stuff. I don't care what you do at home. You just got to do this when you're at work. And they're like, okay, Kate, I'll do it. I said, okay, good. You know, and they went through multiple trainings and all that other kind of stuff. And they learned, you know, how do you place the bait and how do you put the gel in and how do you set a mouse trap, all that kind of stuff. And the other thing about IPM is about shelter, water, and food. You got to get rid of those things. So you got to get rid of the clutter, you got to clean up the food, and you got to get rid of the water. All right, first couple months, PHIs are like, community health workers are like, okay, Kate, yeah. All of a sudden, like, they had some homes with real severe infestations, and they started doing this baiting and gelling and cleaning. They were totally sold on it. So, and I felt like they were the ones that could best communicate that to the community. Social environment, so again, lack of IPM knowledge and life stressors. What we have found is that when they enter the program, they have to start with this 20-page assessment form about their medical history, and that takes about 2 hours. And then we actually come back 2 weeks later and we do an environmental assessment, which takes about 2 hours when we actually walk through the home. And they're like, what did I sign up for? And what the community health workers learn is that they not only address the asthma, but they address the whole family. And so they make sure that the family is connected to the resources that they need. And so that's where we've got a social worker on staff. She's been extremely helpful there to make sure that we have families in the loop that they need. Because otherwise, if they're worried about the electric bill, if they're worried about, you know, court, they're not going to be able to deal with the asthma. Physical environment, like I mentioned earlier, and then health services. Health services in general don't seem to address asthma, and triggers, some do. Not many know that. We don't see it come out that much, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so what was the environmental intervention? So we do this one-on-one motivational interviewing. They've all been trained. They do this, you know, monthly update. You know, we're talking about that. We use the stages of change. So stages of change. So for example, if mom's like, I'm going to be smoking in my house for the rest of my life, and you can't tell me otherwise, you know, the community health worker is going to start at the appropriate place of where, you know, we need to do some educating.